Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming. Look at that, it even works. That's so exciting. So when we were talking about putting this together, we were all working on a lot of different projects that sort of have very different aspects to them, but one of the main kind of themes that runs through all of them is that in each of these projects, somebody from outside of the museum is contributing to the development of content. And the idea here is really thinking about ways to integrate other voices into projects that we do, and specifically into exhibition spaces. So when we're thinking about launching a project that involves outside voices, one of the first questions that we ask actually for any exhibition or any project is, who is the audience? And the next question that we might have is, how do we make it so that they can contribute content to this exhibition? And that is a bit trickier question, although sometimes even who is your audience can be a tricky question. So in this session, we're really going to be thinking about practical issues that are involved with integrating the voices that are from outside the museum into an exhibition space, and some of the challenges that can come up from that, and some of the ways that you can plan ahead to really lay the groundwork for a successful project. So the presenters here are each going to frame practical questions through our own experiences of developing projects like this. Some of these are quite small scale, some of these are larger scale, so there's a number of different things happening in the projects, but I think all of us really took away a lot of practical lessons from doing these projects. So once we go through, we're going to do a very quick overview of the projects that sort of framed our thinking. And then the next thing we're going to do is break up into groups to do lightning workshops. So if you have a project that you're thinking of, that you're working on, this might be a way to kind of work through some of those questions with a group of other people who can kind of help with thinking them out. So we have really broken the process into 3 steps. One of them is front-end preparation, so what happens before you actually really launch into the project. Process and installation, so what's happening in that middle part, like where you're actually in the midst of the project. And then post-project analysis, so a way to be able to practically come away with lessons that you've learned that you might be able to apply to future projects. So we're going to go quickly through each of these projects and then break up into the sessions to have as much time as possible to talk with all of you about the projects that you're working on.
And that's our structure.
That I just went over without the slide.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Mair from the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art. Can everyone hear me okay? Awesome. So today I'm going to be talking with you about an exhibition project we did. The exhibition was Through the Lens, Visions of African American Experience, 1950 to 1970. And the end result was a digital kiosk interactive where visitors could compare an image from the exhibition with a contemporary image. So you can see here it's on the wall next to the works of art, and visitors could compare and then write a response, and I've got an example up there. But I'm covering front-end preparation, so before we got to that point, what was all the things that came before? So one thing when we're talking about visitor voices is which exhibition should you include outside contributors? And so why did we want to do it for this particular exhibition? Well, at the time when we were planning, was right around the time that there were a lot of protests and riots going on about issues of African Americans being killed by cops. So we live in, the museum is in Kansas City, Missouri, and not too far away in Ferguson, there was a lot of things going on with the shooting of Michael Brown. And then during the planning process, the Baltimore riots happened. So we had many conversations about this exhibition and realizing that the types of images that were in this exhibition, so on the left there, you can see one from the 1960s by Danny Lyon, were very similar to a lot of the images people were seeing in the media that was being covered. So we felt like we cannot have this exhibition and not address this. But that took many difficult conversations. So some of our staff felt like, oh, but we're covering, the civil rights in the 1960s, and the exhibition, is not just the civil rights movement, but also more broader issues and other images from the time period. And so we don't need to talk about what's happening today. And I said, no, I'm pretty sure we can't just sweep it under the rug. It's something that's happening in our communities. It's something that's going on right now. And visitors are going to come and they're going to see these images and they're going to think about what's happening today. So we need to provide a way for visitors to respond and see their own voice and opinion in the exhibition. So one of the ways that I kind of got everyone on board as we were having these difficult conversations was actually incorporating it into the exhibition's big idea. So you can see the last line there says that the subjects depicted in these photographs continue to be relevant to issues we face today. So as we were going through the planning period, whenever there was a moment where people were questioning again, should we do this, should we not do it, I was able to point back to the big idea we had agreed upon and say, no, we already talked about this and we agree that this is relevant to things we face today, so it's something that we have to cover. So as we were deciding to do this, we had a community input meeting because we wanted to get feedback from members of our community about this, especially because it's a difficult and complex issue, and kind of see how we should frame this. We wanted to do it, but should we do it at all? That's always a question. So we had this community input meeting and we did paper prototyping and we got feedback, and by and large our community members said, yes, we really feel like this is important. We feel like the museum is a place, is a forum where people feel comfortable talking about this and expressing their thoughts about this, so you should do it. And through that, we then landed on the final selection of images and also photographers. So you can see on the left there, those are some images that were in the exhibition and the photographers that were included. And then on the right, the contemporary photographers that we included in the interactive. And what we did was, because the exhibition was showing civil rights images and also other images taken during the civil rights era moment, we decided to, similarly in the contemporary images, include a wide variety. So we had contemporary portrait photographers, we had people who were covering Ferguson and Baltimore, and then we kind of let visitors make comparisons. But that was all the front end that we did before we got to the final part of putting it on the wall. So now I'm going to pass it along.
There's like lots of little bells going off. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Kristin, and I am from the Portland Art Museum in Portland, Oregon. I am the only person up here that has a very tiny portion of the project being digital. Just to give you some background on the Portland Art Museum, we're a mid-sized institution, and we are known for our Northwest Coast collection, and it's relevant to what we're going to be talking about with this particular exhibition. I wanted to talk about this exhibition because it was the first time that we were able to, as a museum, be quote-unquote agile in our thinking and start to build trust between, start to build trust. We haven't actually arrived at a full trust structure between curatorial education and then also back around to our visitors. It's more like a Venn diagram, right? Other folks at the museum internally started to see also who was and who wasn't at the table with a variety of discussions about this exhibition and why that was important. So this also was a lot of firsts for our institution. This is the first time that we did any sort of exhibition development planning process as an institution. Most of the exhibitions that we create are very small scale. This is also one of our first large scale exhibitions, and it was also one of the first times that we had a dual curator situation. And continuing along firsts, it was the first time that we had interpretive stations in the gallery with a special exhibition, and it was also, luckily for me, was the first time that we were able to have someone evaluate our interpretive stations. So we got an amazing amount of knowledge about the reactions to or what visitors were saying within those stations, and I'm not going to cover that here, but if you're interested, I do have that data. Okay, so the exhibition was Contemporary Native Photographers and the Edward Curtis Legacy, Zig Jackson, Wendy Red Star, Will Wilson. It opened at the Portland Art Museum in February of 2016. So I said this is a list of firsts. Just keep in mind, this was not very long ago. So we've come a long way since February 2016. Blah, blah, blah. I'm going to skip ahead. This is the first time I'm also working from a Google Drive document giving a presentation. So hopefully this I don't mess up. Okay, so just some images from each of the artists, and the very bottom is a very dark image of Edward Curtis. Edward Curtis, in a nutshell, is basically a 19th century photographer who created a portfolio of photographs depicting quote-unquote Native American life. A lot of the stereotypes of what it is and has been to be quote-unquote a Native American are wrapped up in a lot of Curtis imagery. Okay, so big idea. We did have a big idea, which is very, very exciting. We don't often have big ideas. And so the big idea was formed with both curators, several people from the education department, and also the three contemporary Native photographers that are in the exhibition. The main thing I want you to take away from this is that in the big idea, we wanted it to be a critical discussion, a dialogue between the past and the present. Okay. So we had select learning goals, and the interpretive stations are based on these learning goals. The interpretive stations are foregrounded by two select critical pauses in the exhibition, which the curators deemed the most appropriate. Interpretive station verbiage, which I'll get into in a second, evolved from directional and action speech labels, which are common in Science Museum interactives. And the mechanics, the way in which visitors interact with the station, take cues from social media and progressive education museum practice. Okay, audiences for this, I'm running totally out of time. Okay, sorry about that. Audiences, both external and internal. We did 3 rounds of review of the stations. It was very low risk because they were all analog. And the problems that we ran into were mostly around aesthetic, what things looked like in an art museum, and how visitors were able to and not able to approach things based on how they looked, because they had to fit a very specific template, because we have to be neat in art museums. And I have to skip ahead, I apologize. Anyway, so 3 stations. You can see 2 of them there. These are when they're not populated. We had to definitely reevaluate how things were going in the middle. I'm gonna run out of time, but all right, so sorry about that. These are responses from the stations. And the digital part is that there is a Tumblr that resulted out of this with all of the visitor responses that I'm running for visitor stations in the exhibitions.
Hey everybody, I'm excited to be here today to share my story about the process behind Styles and Customs of the 2020s, one of the projects of the Hillman Photography Initiative at Carnegie Museum of Art, which is the project that I've been managing for the past 6 years. So Styles and Customs of the 2020s is a fully immersive virtual reality artwork and installation experienced on the HTC Vive and was on view at Carnegie Museum of Art for 6 months earlier this year. I'd like to begin by introducing our cast, our wonderful cast of characters, almost all of whom are external to Carnegie Museum of Art, and without whom this project would not have been conceptualized, built, or implemented. So we have our agents, who are our critical thinkers in photography, who developed the parameters for each of the projects that we launched this year. Oh, not yet. Just wait. We also have our first artist studio, DIS, who developed the concept and deck that responded to the project parameters developed by the agents. And we have our second artist studio, Scatter, who interpreted and implemented this deck and used it to create a virtual reality environment, a fully immersive VR experience. So we're talking about when your content is a chorus. This content, chorus, is a 3-part harmony. It's gotta all work together. Bear with me here, guys. So, who are our agents? They're the idea generators for the Hillman Photography Initiative, which is an incubator for innovative thinking about photography. Every 2 years, we invite in a new group of agents who develop a theme and programming for each of our 2-year cycles of the initiative. We then bring those ideas back to the museum and then implement it in 8 months, which is incredibly fast. This group of agents developed a series of project parameters that explore the connections between photography, light, and time, and investigate critical contemporary social issues. Styles and Customs of the 2020s began with a prompt generated by our agents. How do photographic technologies shape our perception of people, places, and things in the virtual realm? So we shared this prompt with DIS, a collective of 4 artists who work on digital platforms and installations and curatorial practice that critiques art, culture, and kind of the future of the internet. They responded with a visually and philosophically rich creative brief, which was essentially a 50-page PDF deck titled Styles and Customs of the 2020s. Now, it presented a not-too-distant future dystopia, 2020s, that's not too far away, where all of today's social ills, social unrest, climate change, global economic inequity are magnified 100-fold. We then shared this brief with Scatter, and we asked them to interpret and build it in virtual reality. Now, Scatter is a new media collective with experience across immersive media, including virtual, mixed, and augmented reality. They use photographic techniques such as 3D modeling, volumetric filmmaking, and photogrammetry to build the final experience, which was on Unity, which was the platform for the HTC Vive, as I mentioned. So the experience begins in an ancient cave, animated by the light of a flickering fire. Now, some of you may have been present. We actually had this on site yesterday, so bear with me here. You're going to see it again a little bit. As the cave begins to dissolve, you're transported forward in time to one of these 4 scenes, fully immersive scenes from the future. You then return to the cave 3 minutes later, which essentially ends the experience. So the artwork was installed in the museum's Hall of Architecture, which contains architectural casts from across time periods and continents. It was installed on a rolling media cart, custom designed by ClearStory, a local design firm, because this is actually a special event space. So we had to be able to roll the whole thing up, put it away, and bring it back out. I'm actually often amazed that this project actually came to fruition, because ClearStory had never met or worked with Scatter. Scatter had never met or worked with DIS. The agents had never met DIS or Scatter. And the museum had never before installed a virtual reality artwork, let alone one that depended on dual intellectual property that was installed on a rolling cart in a non-gallery space. So that was pretty crazy. Furthermore, Scatter's artistic practice is based on the mentorship of other artists because they support multi-voiced VR work. So they actually selected 4 artists from around the world and coached them in Unity to build this final experience that I showed you the scenes from. They were working with different technology and multiple time zones. So if you ever feel like you're directing a chorus in which the singers can't hear each other and are speaking in different languages on a stage that may cease to exist at any moment, remember these lessons, that if you bake multiple voices into your process and use it as a metric of your success, really anything is possible. So I know I'm 5 seconds over, but here are my 3 critical takeaways, is that we also had a big idea that we worked on a professional evaluator. Our process is collaborative. We have multiple touch points with staff that are involved from the beginning, from planning, every single department, and we truly build collaboration into it. It's not, as you saw from the agents, it's not about a single-voiced curatorial project. It really is about multiple voices.
All right, so I'm going to be covering the post-project analysis. So I'm going to talk about my project kind of from the point of view of post-project analysis. We did also build evaluation into the project, so we did have some information about how this worked afterwards. So although I'm going to be talking about post-project analysis, I'm going to start with a plug for pre-project planning that involves getting an evaluation plan in place. So this was a very small project. There was actually only, I was the entire team, and working with the curator for an exhibition that was a collection-based exhibition. It was called Menagerie. It was part of a series of exhibitions that came out of the collection that focused on themes in art. So there was one that was portraiture, there was one that was landscape, one that was still life, and the last one in the series was images of animals. So this was an exhibition that when we sat down to do the interpretive plan for this exhibition, the curator said families with children are the main audience, and it was that as an audience was really the focus, and then the investment was made. This was looking at, in this image you see a work from our collection of a Giacomo Balla futurism dog that is moving very quickly, and we actually created a plush toy with a little booklet that gave you a story about the dog. So this was in connection with this exhibition. So it was really something where there was a real focus on families and children as being the main audience, which is unusual. We're a museum of modern and contemporary art. Usually the audience is most pointedly adult. And usually sort of, if we're really honest, a subset of adults who are really, really into contemporary art. So this was a bit of a departure. So we had a lot of discussions about ways that we might be able to engage with family audiences and offer opportunities for them to make connections with works of art that were in the exhibition. And one of the projects that we did, which is the one that I wanted to focus on, is I sat down and interviewed four, because there was a pair of sisters in one of them, 4 young children, and asked them to talk about a work of art that was in the exhibition, recorded what they said, and then animated videos in response to what they talked about. So these are 2 of the works that were selected. The one on the left is a painting by Jean Mair, and the one on the right is a painting by Virginia Cuthbert, who was a Western New York-based artist. Let's see if this will work. I'm going to show, so these are 2 very, very short clips from those 2 videos, just to give a sense. Or not. Let's try this again. Please play.
There is a girl with a bow tie on,
Totally not coming up.
2 cats
There we go.
playing with her. They are lunging on the girl. They look miserable. Looks like a witch. That's her dress. Because witches have black dresses. But she doesn't have a hat. Maybe because she hooked it up. I think these are well, she handed her a hat up, but maybe it's the hook.
So sorry, I had that all the way up. I don't know why it's coming out so softly. But there are definitely hilarious moments when you talk with 5-year-olds about things. You may have, I'm hoping that you heard that the first child, when I asked him what was going on, he said that the girl was lounging with the cats and that they were miserable. And the second one decided that the mirror was actually an image of a witch. And so then she had this very long, involved story that had ghostesses and skeleton. I did the interview right around Halloween, so this was definitely front of mind. Let's see if now it won't go forward. This is awesome. Okay. So one of the things that came out of the evaluation at the end was that the location of the video was actually really problematic. So this is showing where the screen was. You can see it's to the right of one of the entrances, but this is a side entrance to the exhibition. And this was really the spot that there wasn't much space left. I think this is something that often happens with digital projects. It's like, we don't have anything left, so we're going to stick you over here in the corner. And so this gives you a sense, you can see the same picture on the left, but on the right that is standing in the sculpture court looking at the front entrance, you actually, the video is over here behind this post. So even when you're standing in front of the entrance and kind of looking toward it, you can't really see the video. So what we got out of the evaluation was very few people actually found it. When they did find it, we had a small label that explained what it was. I know this is going to come as a shock. Very few people read the labels. So those who did find it were like, what's happening right now? They would put on the headphones, they would not read the label, and then there would be a small child saying, the cats are miserable. And they were like, I have no idea what this is. So I would say, you know, it was about 50% of people did not find it at all. 50 to 60% did not find it at all. Of the like 40-ish% who did find it, about half of them were like, what the hell was that thing? And then the ones who were like, either I figured out what it was because I bothered to read the label, or the people who were like, I didn't read the label, I didn't know what it was, but I thought it was hilarious anyway. They enjoyed it. So we had like some positive, but then a lot of stuff that was like, oh, we're gonna have to do this differently in the future. So that is my sort of plug for setting up that evaluation ahead of time so that you're able to have this kind of post project analysis. So we're now going to move on to the lightning workshop part of this. So what we're going to do is, if you are interested in discussing pre-planning, so front-end preparation, please come to this part of the room. This one right up here in front of us. If you are interested in process and installation, please go to the back of the room. And if you're interested in post-project analysis, please go to this part of the room, and we're going to start having discussions.